Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all of the major world empires throughout history in the style of a rise and fall of each empire, and then highlighting a specific leader from each empire as well. Today we will be covering the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire. So these are two empires that came after the fall of the Macedonian Empire, or after the fall of Alexander the Great, so they actually come very nicely together. And Seleucus the first Nicator, was the first founding emperor of the Seleucid Empire, and Ptolemy the first Soter was the first founding emperor of the Ptolemaic Empire. So they both pair very well. So these are two areas I knew quite a bit, I would say, about the Macedonian Empire and Alexander the Great, but the descending empires I knew little about, so hopefully you enjoy this as much as I did. So without further ado, we will start with the first empire and then discuss the first leader, and then at the end we will have a comparison between the two leaders to learn a little bit more about both of them, their respective empires, and perhaps how to better lead our own lives. So starting with the Seleucid Empire. So the Seleucid Empire was one of the successor states that emerged after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE. Established by Seleucus I Nicator, one of Alexander's generals, it became one of the most powerful Hellenistic empires in the ancient world. Therefore, we will seek to find the rise and fall of this empire. Starting with the rise in 312 to 301 BCE. Seleucus I Nicator, who lived from 312 or reigned from 312 to 281 BCE, after the death of Alexander, Alexander's vast empire was divided among his generals in a series of conflicts known as the Diadochi Wars. Seleucus emerged as the ruler of the eastern portion, which included territories from modern-day Iran to Central Asia. So Seleucus I, after the fall of Alexander the Great, came into control the eastern provinces of the former Alexandrian or Macedonian Empire. As for expansion and consolidation, Seleucus faced numerous challenges in establishing his empire. He engaged in wars of conquest and diplomacy to secure his borders. So important to note, so far the leaders, some have been great in military strategy, some have been great in terms of diplomacy. Some of the best leaders have combined the two, but not necessarily so. Some have been just great military leaders, and that has been sufficient. As we saw with the Macedonian Empire, for example, Alexander the Great was probably more of a conqueror than he was a diplomat, whereas his father, Philip II, engaged in more diplomacy, especially with the other Greek states. Nonetheless, Seleucus often had to clash with other Diadochi in the Diadochi Wars. He also faced resistance from local rulers and revolts within his territories. So even though he gained the eastern territories, there were still internal revolts. Because one of the things about the Macedonian Empire was it was so multicultural, or under Alexander the Great, it was so multicultural, so multi-ethnic, it would be hard to sort of maintain these people under one nation, as we shall see. As for the territorial extent, at its height, the Seleucid Empire encompassed an enormous territory, including parts of modern-day Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. As for the Golden Age of the Seleucid Empire, from 281 to 141 BCE, starting with Antiochus I Soter, from 281 to 261 BCE. Seleucus I was succeeded by his son, Antiochus I. During his reign, the latter's reign, Antiochus' reign, the empire experienced relative stability and prosperity, perhaps thanks to his father. Antiochus expanded the empire further into Asia Minor and consolidated Seleucid rule over the eastern provinces. As for cultural exchange, the Seleucid Empire was a melting pot for various cultures, where Greek, Persian, and local traditions coexisted. This cultural fusion was known as Hellenistic culture and influenced art, architecture, and governance. Moving to the Seleucid decline around the 3rd to the 2nd century BCE. The empire started facing continuous challenges from external enemies, including the Ptolemaic kingdom, which we shall cover, which was one of the other successor states of the Macedonian or Alexandrian Empire in Egypt. The rising power of Rome, as we shall see, contests both of them, and various local revolts. Additionally, internal strife, corruption, and economic difficulties contributed to the empire's decline. As for the Seleucid decline and fragmentation from 141 to 64 BCE, started with civil wars. The later Seleucid rulers faced internal conflicts and dynastic struggles, weakening the central authority. This allowed semi-autonomous satraps, provincial governors, to gain significant power. So satraps were previous leaders under the Achaemenid or the Persian Empire. They called them satraps, who were regional governors. So these individuals started contesting this throne and gained significant power. So perhaps some of them may have even descended from the former Achaemenid Empire. As for the Parthian and Bactrian invasions, the eastern provinces of the empire succeeded, giving rise to the Parthian Empire and the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. These states gradually eroded Seleucid territory. So unlike the Roman Empire, which collapsed in the west first and then in the east later, the Seleucid Empire seems to have collapsed in the east first and then the west lasted slightly longer. But nonetheless, this is all east relative to the Roman Empire, or part of the Eastern Roman Empire, as we shall see. As for Roman intervention, the Roman Republic expanding its influence in Eastern Mediterranean, so this is before the Roman Empire, as I'm currently reading Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, one of the inspirations behind this series. This is prior to that, which is probably a better resource on that would be Plutarch's Parallel Lives. And so the Roman Republic, expanding its influence in the Eastern Mediterranean, started to intervene in Seleucid affairs. They supported rival claimants to the Seleucid throne, exacerbating internal strife. So the end of the Seleucid Empire, 64 BCE and beyond. Pompey, the famous Pompey covered in Plutarch's Parallel Lives. In 64 BCE, the Roman general Pompey the Great intervened in the region, defeating the Seleucid king Antiochus XIII and annexing much of the empire's territory to Rome. Pompey the Great was known for being probably one of the bitter rivals of Julius Caesar. As for the legacy of the Seleucid Empire, so Pompey eventually was the one to defeat the Seleucid Empire and claim it for Rome under the Roman Republic. As for a legacy, after the fall of the Seleucid Empire, the region continued to experience shifting borders and the rise of various successor states, including the Roman province of Syria and the Parthian Empire. Thus, the Seleucid Empire's legacy is seen as a cultural and architectural contributions to the Hellenistic world. Additionally, it played a crucial role in the spread of Greek culture and influence in the Near East, maintaining and continuing Alexander's legacy. However, internal conflicts, external pressures, and the rise of regional powers ultimately led to the decline and fragmentation. So from the satraps who started causing internal stripes, the Romans who were making this worse, and ultimately Pompey the Great who conquered them. So that is an overview of the Seleucid Empire. Now we will discuss in detail one of its most significant rulers, Seleucus I Nicator. So his birth in approximately 358 BCE and his death was approximately 281 BCE. The most important ruler, perhaps, of the Seleucid Empire, as previously mentioned, is Seleucus I Nicator. Therefore, we will seek to find a biography of his life. As for his early life and service under Alexander, Seleucus I was born in Europos, located in the ancient region of Macedon, so Macedonian descent. He came from a noble family and was likely of noble birth. Seleucus gained prominence as one of the trusted generals in the army of Alexander the Great. He fought alongside Alexander in various conquests, displaying exceptional military prowess and strategic thinking. As for his role in the Diadochi Wars, after the death of Alexander in 323 BCE, perhaps from assassination or perhaps on his own accord, the empire was divided among his generals, leading to the Diadochi Wars. Seleucus was initially assigned the satrapy, or the province of Babylonia. However, his ambition and strategic vision drove him to seek a larger domain. Babylon also had satraps of the Babylonian Empire, as we have previously covered, as we also covered the Achaemenid Empire, and I hope you endeavor or have checked those out. As for the establishment of the Seleucid Empire, Seleucus recognized the potential of the eastern provinces and embarked on a series of successful military campaigns to expand his territory. His conquests included Persia, Media, and eventually parts of India. By 312 BCE, Seleucus had established the Seleucid Empire, encompassing a vast expanse of land from Anatolia to the borders of India. As for wars and alliances, Seleucus faced many numerous challenges during his reign. He engaged in conflicts with rival Diadochi, most notably Antigonus the First, Monophthalmus in the Wars of Diadochi. He also formed strategic alliances, notably with Ptolemy I, Soter of Egypt, whom we will cover shortly. As for his administrative reforms, Seleucus I was known for his effective administrative reforms. He implemented policies to ensure the integration of diverse cultures within his empire, blending Greek, Persian, and local traditions. He established key cities such as Antioch, which is the name of his son, one is likely named after the other, which became major centers of Hellenistic culture and commerce. As for his military campaigns, Seleucus undertook further conquests to consolidate his empire, including campaigns against the Maurya Empire in northern India, whom we have covered and I hope you endeavor to check out. These endeavors extended to the reach of his empire through the though the eastern provinces would later become semi-autonomous. So he sort of lost his control over them through his descendants. As for his latter years or later years and legacy, in this period, Seleucus faced challenges from rivals and internal dissent. He ultimately was assassinated in 281 BCE, likely by one of his own officers. Perhaps could it have been that late that he died? Yeah, supposedly. Yeah, in 281 BCE, he was assassinated by one of his officers. Seleucus I, Nicator, is remembered as the founder of the Seleucid Empire and a key figure in the broader history of the Hellenistic world. His strategic acumen, administrative reforms, and cultural integration efforts left a lasting legacy in the regions he ruled. The empire he established continued to be a significant player in the ancient world for several centuries after his death, so he managed to create a lasting legacy within his empire for some generations after him. But nonetheless, the vision of Alexander could never have been fully restored. So as for the content of the slide, title, we have Seleucus I, Nicator, and the Seleucid Empire. Empire after the division of the Macedonian Empire, ruled by the Seleucid dynasty until Pompey the Great defeated them in 63 BCE. Significant leader of the Roman Republic. Significant leader, Seleucus I, Nicator. Empire Seleucid. Period 312 to 63 BCE. Modern locations: Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, and Lebanon. Million square kilometers 3.90, million square miles 1.51. So still certainly one of the largest empires we've had. 2.89% of the world excluding Antarctica. The only one so far larger would be the Alexander's Empire, or the Macedonian Empire under his rule, and the Achaemenid Empire is actually the largest we have so far. But some contest, maybe some of the dynasties in China might have been larger, but these are so far the largest recorded based on the information we have. And this one, Seleucid Empire, despite being a fragmented part of the Alexandrian Empire, still at its peak was one of the largest empires to date, according to the information we have. Capital city, Alexandria. Government, Hellenistic monarchy, also known as a basileus. Common languages, accidentally got deleted here. Common languages was, pardon me, it got deleted, but it was, I believe Greek was the official language, but they included many other languages within the region. As for religion, Olympianism or Hellenism, Babylonian, Hellenistic Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. Population several tens of millions. And pardon me, Alexandria is actually the capital of the Ptolemaic Empire. The capital of the Seleucid Empire was I'll have to look that up in a little bit, or maybe I can quickly look it up now. Share this with capital of the Seleucid Empire. Pardon me, it would be Seleucia. Should have been able to remember that, but pardon me, I misput Alexandria on the slide. In terms of images, in the top left we have a sculpture of Seleucus I Nicator. To the right we have an image of him as well, as we can see, quite handsome, one might say. To the right we have some coins with some of the symbols. So the symbols of the Seleucid monarchy were a horned horse, an elephant, and an anchor, or symbols of the Seleucid Empire. Below that we have a coin with Seleucus I Nicator on it. To the right of that we have some historical events that took place in the Seleucid Empire, starting with the Wars of Diadochi in 312 BCE, Battle of Ipsus 301 BCE, Roman Seleucid War 192 to 188 BCE, Treaty of Apamea 188 BCE, Maccabean Revolt 167 to 160 BCE, Seleucia, which was taken by the Parthians in 141 BCE. So the capital was captured at that time, and Battle of Ecbatana in 129 BCE, and the annexation into Rome in 63 BCE by Pompey. Area, as we can see, it was about 3 million square kilometers and reached 3.9 million square kilometers in 301 BCE. Then it started to decline to 2.6 million by 240 BCE, to 800,000 in 175 BCE, down to 100,000 in BCE. So by the time the Romans actually defeated them in 63 BCE, it was but a fraction of what it used to be. To the right we have a beautiful old road of the Seleucid Empire, and above that we have an image which is supposedly Chandragupta Maurya entertaining his bride from Babylon, which is a conjectural interpretation of a marriage agreement between the Seleucids and Chandragupta Maurya, related by Apian. So something, as we covered, the Mauryan Empire as well. And above that we have the map, and we can see the massive region that it covered, from all the way from the Mediterranean up to the Caspian Sea, down to the Arabian Sea. We can see even the Ptolemaic Empire was much smaller, and the Maurya Empire was right at its here, and there was marriages between it. So very massive region, despite even being a successor state and despite never being as large as the empire of Alexander the Great, or Macedonian Empire. So we will now continue to the next empire. So the Ptolemaic Empire. The Ptolemaic Kingdom or Empire was one of the successor states that emerged after the death of Alexander the Great. Established by Ptolemy the First Soter, one of Alexander's generals, it became a powerful Hellenistic kingdom centered in Egypt. Therefore, we seek to find a detailed account of the rise and fall of this empire. Starting with the rise of the Ptolemaic Kingdom from 323 to 305 BCE. Starting with Ptolemy Soter in 323 to 283 BCE. After the death of Alexander in 323 BCE, his vast empire was divided among his generals, resulting in the Diadochi Wars. Ptolemy, a trusted general, was appointed as satrap, or regional governor, of Egypt. He quickly established himself and proclaimed himself pharaoh, effectively breaking away from the central authority. So this is actually considered the longest and final dynasty of Egypt. As for the war with Seleucus, Ptolemy clashed with Seleucus I Nicator, another of Alexander's generals, in a series of conflicts known as the Syrian Wars. These wars largely determined the boundaries of their respective territories. As for cultural and economic flourish, under Ptolemy I, the kingdom experienced a cultural renaissance. Alexandria, the capital, became a great center of learning, boasting the famous Library of Alexandria, which is unfortunately no longer in existence today. I had mentioned in one of my previous videos on the for the University of Pennsylvania. Actually, I mentioned that the Library of Alexandria is often given images of one great fire, but it actually slowly declined over time. It wasn't one critical event that ended it. It was slow neglect over time, or lack of appreciation, or active destruction. But nonetheless, it was over time. So I note that important relics that we have today need to be maintained continuously, and it's the real destruction, or often destruction, isn't some sudden, immediate event. But the Ptolemies also developed a sophisticated administrative system that allowed the kingdom to prosper economically. As for the golden age of the Ptolemaic kingdom from 283 to 145 BCE, Ptolemy II Philadelphus reigned after from 283 to 246 BCE. The reign of Ptolemy II saw the kingdom at its zenith. He expanded its influence in the Aegean and Levant, engaging in diplomatic marriages and alliances to strengthen his position. As for cultural exchange and intellectual achievements, Alexandria became a cosmopolitan city, hosting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from all over the Mediterranean world. The Museum of Alexandria and the Library of Alexandria were renowned centers of learning. As for Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra, and the Ptolemaic decline from 51 to 30 BCE. The most famous Ptolemaic ruler, Cleopatra VII, ascended the throne in 51 BCE. Her tumultuous reign saw Egypt caught in a power struggle between Rome and Parthia. After her defeat by Augustus or Octavian at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, Egypt was annexed by Rome, marking the end of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Not to mention maybe one of the greatest romance stories between her, Caesar, and Mark Antony. There's in Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, he notes there's this other leader, emperor that was quite significant in terms of warfare, but he said that none could compete with Julius Caesar, because not only was he great in military strategy and great in terms of ambition and great in terms of learning. He says learning in terms of conquering, but he was also a great romancer. And his romance with Cleopatra might be one of the greatest or most tragic love stories of all time. And her later romance with Mark Antony, which might even be more significant, or one of the most classic love stories of all time. But also, so after the battle with Octavian at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, Egypt was annexed by Rome, marking the end of the Ptolemaic kingdom. So 30 BCE and beyond, the end of the Ptolemaic kingdom. For the annexation by Rome after the defeat, Cleopatra and her lover, Mark Antony, who fought on her side, Mark Antony was fighting with her against Octavius, sort of deciding who was going to rule the kingdom after Julius Caesar. Egypt was incorporated into the Roman Empire by Octavian, or Augustus Caesar, the later Emperor Augustus, in 30 BCE. This marked the official end of the Ptolemaic kingdom. As for the legacy of the Ptolemaic kingdom left a profound legacy. It was the hub of Hellenistic culture, with Alexandria rivaling cities like Athens as centers of learning and culture. But the Ptolemies' contributions to astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and other fields had a lasting impact on Western knowledge. Herodotus, this is many years before, but Herodotus notes in ancient Egypt that the Egyptians were the greatest doctors. So perhaps that legacy still existed to this time, but that might be tough because there's, as we covered, the old kingdom of Egypt, the middle kingdom of Egypt, some of the kingdoms during the intermediate periods, the new kingdom of Egypt, and now this is the longest and final dynasty of Egypt. Additionally, Cleopatra's involvement with Rome and her relationship with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony played a crucial role in the politics of the late Roman Empire and subsequent transition of to the Roman Empire. So maybe Cleopatra alone's influence on the Roman Empire is immeasurable. Perhaps if it weren't for her, maybe Julius Caesar and Mark Antony would have gotten along better. Thus, the Ptolemaic kingdom's history is a testament to the enduring influence of Alexander the Great and the complex interplay of cultures in the Hellenistic world. So for now, a more detailed biography of Ptolemy I Soter. His birth was approximately 367 BCE, and his death in approximately 383 BCE. As for his early life and service under Alexander, Ptolemy I, Soter, born in Macedonia, was a trusted companion and one of the most distinguished generals of Alexander the Great. He likely belonged to a noble family and received a thorough education in the classical Greek traditions. So that's part of why the Hellenistic culture was so strong even in this region in Egypt that he came to rule over. Ptolemy played a significant role in Alexander's conquest, distinguishing himself in battles and demonstrating exceptional military acumen. He was one of the Diadochi, the trusted generals who inherited portions of Alexander's empire after his death. As for his rule in Egypt after Alexander's death in 323 BCE, Ptolemy was appointed as satrap, or governor of Egypt. Recognizing the strategic importance and potential of the region, Ptolemy declared himself pharaoh of Egypt, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty. So the pharaoh is an even stronger claim than a traditional king, often. As for his military campaigns, Ptolemy faced challenges from other Diadochi, particularly Seleucus I Nicator, in the wars of the Diadochi, perhaps because they were closest together, but perhaps because they were two of the most important successors of Alexander the Great. These conflicts determined the boundaries of their respective territories, and Ptolemy managed to consolidate his control over Egypt and parts of neighboring regions. As for cultural and economic achievements, Ptolemy I was patron of the arts and culture. He invested heavily in the city of Alexandria, transforming it into a magnificent metropolis and a center of Hellenistic civilization. Under his patronage, the renowned Library of Alexandria was established, attracting scholars and thinkers from all over the world. And as mentioned, it was destroyed over time, not in one instant event, but it's sad to think of perhaps all the lost wisdom that went down with it. As for Ptolemy also fostered economic prosperity through effective administrative reforms and development of a sophisticated bureaucracy. Egypt became a major center of trade and agriculture in the Mediterranean. So maybe it was not necessarily him who let the Library of Alexandria go, but it was his descendants didn't appreciate it to the same level he did. As for war with Antigonus and Demetrius, Ptolemy was involved in conflicts with Antigonus, the first Monophthalmus, and his son Demetrius Poliocrates. These wars were part of a broader struggle among the Diadochi for dominance over Alexander's former empire. Ptolemy managed to hold his own against their advances. As for legacy and death, Ptolemy I Soter's reign in Egypt established a lasting dynasty that would rule for nearly 3 centuries. His administrative reforms and cultural contributions played a crucial role in shaping the character of the Ptolemaic kingdom, bringing Greek traditions from the Macedonian Alexander the Great into Egypt. Ptolemy died in 283 BCE, leaving a stable and prosperous kingdom to his descendants. He was succeeded by his son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who continued his father's policies and further expanded the influence of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Philadelphus is a Greek word. Phila is love of, and Delphus, I actually thought it was reference to Delphi, the Oracle of Delphus, but apparently it means brotherly love. Philadelphia means city of brotherly love. Ptolemy I's reign is remembered as a period of stability, cultural flourishing, and economic prosperity in Egypt, setting the stage for the golden age of the Ptolemaic kingdom, its descendant. His legacy as a skilled military commander, astute administrator, and patron of culture left an indelible mark on the history of the ancient world. So something that could be said for both Ptolemy and Seleucus is perhaps some of the great achievements of Alexander the Great might be able to be claimed by some of his generals, as hence after Alexander the Great's death or assassination, they still managed to be great conquerors, but never none necessarily ruling over the others. But maybe Alexander the Great would not have been Alexander the Great without Seleucus and Ptolemy I and Seleucid I. So we will now discuss the content of the slide, which in this case is correct, or has no errors, which the previous one does, but I'll put in the description the edits. Title: Ptolemy I, Soter, and the Ptolemaic Kingdom, the longest and final dynasty of Egypt. empire after the division of the Macedonian Empire. Significant leader, Ptolemy I Soter. Empire, Ptolemaic period, 305 to 30 BCE. Modern location, Egypt, Libya, Cyprus, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. Million square kilometers, 100 million square kilometers, 0.39% of the world, 0.74%. A little bit smaller than the Seleucid Empire. However, it's about on level of some of the greater Egyptian empires, perhaps one of the largest Egyptian empires as well. So, and it was always been a contested region to hold. So despite being slightly smaller than the Seleucid Empire or the Achaemenid Empire or the Alexandrian Empire for that matter, or maybe even some of the Chinese dynasties of ancient China, or even some of the ancient Indian, as supposedly those are recorded to be slightly smaller though. It's still a very important area. That's where a lot of the early domestication of animals were produced, so some of the most developed and hardest land to conquer. Capital, Alexandria. Government, Hellenistic monarchy, Basileus, with also pharaohs. They're considered pharaoh is the leader. Common languages, Greek was the official language and Egyptian was the secondary language. Religion, cult of Alexander, which is the official religion. Egyptian polytheism was probably the most common religion. Greek polytheism was also common there. Judaism, Greco-Buddhism, and Hermetism. Population 4.9 to 7.5 million, so slightly smaller than the Seleucid Empire, but maybe in one of the oldest developed regions of the world. As for images, in the top left we have an image of Ptolemy I Soter. To the right we have a coin which has the eagle of Zeus, so evidently bringing in some of the Greek or Hellenism or the Greek polytheism. To the right we have an image of Ptolemy as Pharaoh, we have Pharaoh Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, his son. You can see quite a similar resemblance, quite masculine king who reigned from 309 to 246 BCE. Ptolemy, and then to the right we have Ptolemy as Pharaoh, which is in Egypt in the British Museum in London. I have been there, so likely I've seen it. He looks very happy, I have to say. Below that we have a coin with Pharaoh Ptolemy III, Eucrates, a little maybe less warlike looking, at least, but his helmet looks quite aggressive. And to the left we have the beautiful Cleopatra VII. As mentioned, a lot of these statues lose their noses, but that's kind of sort of. I mentioned the Percy Shelley's Ozymandias, the great poem, and that no matter how great Ozymandias was over time, his great statue slowly turned to rubble. But it's the job of us, historians, or people interested in history, to sort of keep them alive. To the right and below that we have the Temple of Kom Ombo, which was constructed by the Ptolemies. Beautiful site. I'd like to visit. I just haven't been to Egypt. Probably maybe the place I'd most like to go. Maybe eventually, maybe with the help of you, I might be able to go. To the right we have Ptolemy. We have Cleopatra and her son, whose name is Caesarius. And to the right we have Ptolemy the 12th, the father of Cleopatra, both in beautiful Egyptian art style. Above that we have the map of the Ptolemaic kingdom. So as we can see, Seleucid kingdom is up there, and it ruled over the whole Nile Valley region, even more so into the northwest along the Mediterranean. So maybe even larger than some of the Egyptian empires, which we have covered, and I hope you endeavor to check out. And if you have, thank you very much. Now for the comparison between Seleucus I Nicator of the Seleucid Empire and Ptolemy I Soter of the Ptolemaic kingdom. So, background, Seleucus I Nicator was born in 358 BCE in Europus in Macedon. His role under Alexander was Seleucus was one of Alexander's most trusted generals, known for his military prowess and strategic thinking. The territory assigned after Alexander's death was initially given the satrapy of Babylonia, and Seleucus ambitiously expanded his territory to establish the Seleucid Empire. As for Ptolemy I Soter, his birth was in 367 BCE, so he was slightly older 367 BCE comes before 358 BCE in Macedonia. So they're both of Macedonian birth, and they were both generals who went alongside Alexander the Great. His role under Alexander, Ptolemy was also a distinguished general under Alexander's army, known for his military skills and loyalty. As for his territory assigned, after Alexander's death, he was appointed the satrap of Egypt. Ptolemy declared himself pharaoh and founded the Ptolemaic kingdom. I ask you, maybe, which would you prefer to inherit of those regions of Alexander's former empire? As for their territorial expansion, Seleucus I Nicator, his conquests, he successfully expanded his empire into Persia, Media. We covered both the Persian, the Achaemenid Empire, the Median Empire, and even parts of India. We've covered a few Indian empires so far as well, which I hope you endeavor or have checked out, which in the latter I'm thankful, creating one of the largest Hellenistic empires in history. So it's important to know Seleucid I Nicator's empire was larger than Ptolemy I Soter. But maybe the real estate in Egypt with the Great Pyramids of Giza maybe is better real estate. And with the Nile, the fertile Nile Valley, with the Nile River. As for wars and alliances, Seleucus I Nicator engaged in wars with other Diadochi, including the wars of the Diadochi, and formed strategic alliances for territorial gain. So he was not just a military leader, but also knew how to make strategic alliances, maybe even more so than Alexander the Great, who was more focused on conquering and battle. But nonetheless, Alexander was pretty exceptional at it. As for Ptolemy I Soter, his focus was on Egypt. Ptolemy focused primarily on consolidating and developing his power in Egypt, which he did create, pretty much claiming back all of the former Egyptian empire territory. As for his conflict with Antigonus and Demetrius, he fought with Antigonus I Monophthalmus and his son Demetrius Polycrates in various conflicts, particularly in the Aegean. So fighting different battles necessarily, but also fighting against each other on occasion, and eventually delineating the boundary between the two empires. As for administrative reforms, starting with Seleucus I Nicator, starting with cultural integration, he implemented policies to blend Greek, Persian, and local traditions, creating a diverse cosmopolitan empire, part of the legacy of Alexander the Great, and having a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious, multilingual empire was maintained by his successors. As for foundation of cities, he established key cities like Antioch, which became major centers of Hellenistic culture and commerce. I believe Antioch was also one of the capitals under the Seleucid Empire. As for Ptolemy I Soter, his cultural and economic development, he invested heavily in Alexandria, making it the great center of learning and culture, and he established the famous Library of Alexandria. As for his bureaucratic reforms, he developed a sophisticated administrative system that promoted economic prosperity and stability in Egypt. As for their cultural contributions, starting with Seleucus I Nicator, with cultural fusion, he encouraged the coexistence of Greek, Persian, and local traditions within his empire, contributing to the broader Hellenistic culture. As for Ptolemy I Soter, as the intellectual center, he transformed Alexandria into a renowned center of learning, attracting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from around the Mediterranean, with the great Library of Alexandria. As for their two legacies, starting with Seleucus I Nicator, he was the founder of the Seleucid Empire. His military conquests and administrative acumen established one of the most powerful Hellenistic empires of the ancient world. Not quite as powerful as the Alexander's empire, but I believe the most powerful of the successors' empires. As for Ptolemy I Soter, he was the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty, so the both founders of dynasties established under the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, which would endure nearly 3 centuries, leaving a significant cultural and intellectual legacy, sometimes considered the longest-lasting Egyptian empire. So thus, while Seleucus I Nicator and Ptolemy I Soter were skilled military commanders and effective rulers, their legacies were shaped by the unique circumstances and territories they governed. Seleucus focused on expansive territorial conquest and cultural integration, while Ptolemy concentrated on consolidating power in Egypt. So slightly different. Seleucus I was focused on expanding. Ptolemy I Soter was focused on consolidating power in Egypt and fostering cultural and intellectual achievements. Both figures played pivotal roles in the development of the Hellenistic world. So you could say the Seleucid Empire was slightly more multicultural, but that's not to say the Ptolemaic kingdom wasn't open to the different cultures in Egypt. So both similar in that sense. So the conclusion here is that they sort of came from pretty similar backgrounds. They both came from noble families. They both fought for Alexander the Great, but given the way the land was divided up, they both sort of inherited different lands, and both did pretty much the best they could with their both respective regions. Neither of them lost their empires, as their later descendants would, but nonetheless two great leaders and two very fascinating empires, which really sort of complete the picture of the Macedonian Empire, which I hope you have or will check out. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful for your support. This is Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you.